2009, the deficit is projected to rise to $482 billion, or 3.3% of GDP.
The new U.S. national deficit numbers announced on Monday, a record high, were the latest sign of an economy in decline, with foreclosures rising, home prices falling, soaring energy prices, and nearly 500,000 jobs lost since January. Democratic presidential hopeful Barack Obama met with more than a dozen economic advisors in Washington, D.C. Present at the meeting were AFL-CIO President John Sweeney, Google Chairman and CEO Eric Schmidt, and New Jersey Governor John Corzine. Billionaire investor Warren Buffett joined via speakerphone.
Warren, are you on? I'm here. Good to talk to you.
Also present at the meeting were former Fed Chairman under Carter and Reagan, Paul Volcker, and two former Treasury Secretaries, Paul O'Neill from the George W. Bush administration and Robert Rubin from the Clinton administration.
One of the things that is somewhat disheartening about Obama's economic team is that if we are looking for change, then it's not clear we should be looking toward the people who got us to the situation we're in today. And the people who brought us to this point are those who championed financial deregulation during the 80s and 90s. And first and foremost among those would be Paul Volcker, who began the process of deregulation in the early 1980s. Robert Rubin continued that in the 1990s, championing the repeal of what was known as the Glass-Steagall Act that regulated banks. And then, of course, Paul O'Neill, under the Bush administration, continued to be an advocate for further financial deregulation. So it's not clear that these are the people who are going to lead us to a new regulatory environment that can prevent some of the problems that we're living through right now.
On this, the ayes are 72, the nays are 13.
On Saturday, in a rare weekend session, the U.S. Senate passed a housing rescue bill aimed at sparing 400,000 struggling homeowners from foreclosure. But it was also a financial bailout of the troubled giant mortgage companies Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Those ailing companies back or own $5 trillion in mortgages, or nearly half the U.S. total. President Bush, originally opposed to the bill, signed it into law on Wednesday morning.
The bailout, unfortunately, is necessary because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, these two giant mortgage dealers that are quasi-private, quasi-public entities, are so large that if they failed and they were on the verge of insolvency, it would have serious repercussions and snowballing effects throughout the financial system. What the bailout package failed to do, however, was to enact any kind of quid pro quo for this aid to the financial sector. For example, imposing significant capital requirements, imposing new forms of regulation. In the case of Fannie Mae, it probably would make sense to consider nationalizing it. It was, in fact, a national entity and part of the federal government until 1968. Because if we're going to socialize the losses and make the public bear the cost of losing money, the public should also reap the benefits when Fannie Mae is doing well.
Now, what's the possibility of either John McCain or Barack Obama nationalizing these companies?
Certainly, I think that the discussion has begun, and I do appreciate the fact that at the summit that Obama held, there was a discussion begun about re-regulation of the financial industry and what we can do to avert further crises like this. So there's certainly more coming from the Obama camp than there is from the McCain camp. As far as I can see from McCain's website and his public statements, he does not seem to have an economic policy or many plans for the economy beyond the continuation of the Bush-era tax cuts.
What should the government be doing to help middle and low-income Americans? What should the government be doing for people, and what should people be asking the government to do?
I think what the federal government needs to do is to protect Americans against the vagaries of markets. Financial markets, when they are deregulated, are very volatile, but also regular markets, the oil market and the housing market, are very volatile. Prices go up and down. People have difficulty managing to live a stable economic life. And one of the things that governments can do, and that many governments do, is to take some of the things that people need outside of the marketplace so that people have some basic standard of living that they can count on. You know, providing health care that is mandated or provided through the public sector is one way that people can be protected from the vagaries of the market, so that their health care is not dependent upon an employer, is not dependent upon their having wealth or anything like that. Making sure that our educational system is well funded, making sure that people can afford colleges and that colleges have plenty of openings at affordable prices. These are things that government can do to help people live more stable lives, even in the midst of a volatile global economy.